So hopefully we're comfortable with doing it with one term, because two terms is a little more challenging. In the first example that we're going to do here, example 8, we need to get rid of the 2 plus root 6. The 2 is totally fine in the denominator, but because we're adding root 6 to it, we have to change it. So this is where we need to remember that conjugate thing that we just did in the last video. Conjugates, remember, cross off the middle terms, and they turn it into just nice, pretty numbers. So up here, we're going to take a look at our denominator. It is 2 plus the square root of 6. So if I want that to disappear, I'm going to find the conjugate of it, which is 2 minus the square root of 6. You change the sign. And then when we FOIL these things out, we're going to end up with a nice, pretty negative 2. No more square roots in the denominator. So let's do this problem start to finish. When I get this problem, look at the denominator. It has a root in it. Not allowed. So that means I need to somehow get rid of it. Because there are two terms here, a 2 and a root 6, we can't just multiply it by root 6. Because if I multiplied this by root 6, this part would simplify, but then I would end up with 2 root 6, and we would still have a square root in the denominator. So what we need to do is multiply by the conjugate. So we got to find the conjugate first, and it is 2 minus the square root of 6. You always change your sign. And then remember, whatever we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. So on the top, we have some simplifying to do. We're going to have to distribute this negative 2 to both of our things inside of the parenthesis. So we have negative 4. And then negative 2 times negative root 6 would give me positive 2 root 6. And this is all divided by. We could multiply this one out, but it was kind of already done for us. We end up with negative 2 in the denominator. Remember, you're FOILing. So 2 times 2 is going to give us 4. 2 times negative root 6 gives me negative 2 root 6. These two gives me positive 2 root 6. And then root 6 times negative root 6 gives me negative 6. So remember, conjugates are so amazing because our middle terms cross off. And we get 4 minus 6, which is where that negative 2 came from. So even though this red thing over here doesn't have a square root anywhere in the denominator, doesn't have any fractions underneath, we need to make sure that just our numbers are simplified. So we need to divide these two numbers and then also divide these two numbers because negative 2 is underneath both of them. So negative 4 divided by negative 2 gives me positive 2. Positive 2 divided by negative 2 gives me negative 1. So we end up with 2 minus the square root of 6. And again, if you typed the beginning thing into your calculator and this thing that we ended up with in your calculator, you will get exactly the same messy decimal, but this is a simplified rational form. Let's do another one. So this one has 2 square roots. Still okay. We just need to find the conjugate. So you look at your denominator. You rewrite your denominator exactly the same, except change the sign. And then you have to remember, whatever you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. And it has to be exactly the same on top and bottom. So what we have on the top is the square root of c plus the square root of d times the square root of c plus the square root of d. And on the bottom, we have our conjugates. So lots of FOILing going on. Why don't you pause the video and make sure that you can do this part on your own. And then play it when you get done and make sure that your answer matches mine. Alright, you should have ended up with c plus 2 times the square root of cd plus d. all divided by c minus d. And this is our final answer because there is nothing that I can take out of the square root up at the top. There is not a fraction inside of a square root, and there's no square root in my denominator. So this brings us to the end of section 6.6 and all of our video lectures. So make sure if you had questions throughout all of this that you write them down. Maybe put stars next to it in the notes, and I can answer them when I get back.